This is our news, the weekend edition. And on the broadcast tonight, the immigration minister defends the granting of work permits to Mexican workers. Plus, the warning by the Pan American Health Organization to countries that relax measures too quickly. And later on, a new business that brings a restaurant to you.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Knowles, and thanks so much for joining us. Immigration Minister Ellsworth Johnson is addressing concerns surrounding the granting of work permits to more than 100 Mexican workers involved on the Bakers Bay project. In a statement, Minister Johnson sought to justify the decision, stating the approval of the work permits were to facilitate technical works, adding that the skill sets would also be shared with the Bahamian workforce. Following the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, Bakers Bay developers expressed to government their desire to move swiftly into rebuilding and reconstruct the project within a year and a half. Minister Johnson explained that government refused the original request for 500 work permits to prioritize the Bahamian labor force. Instead, the approval was given to grant 135 work permits. According to Johnson, currently there are 420 Bahamians employed on the project. Now, videos and photos surfaced on social media showing the group arriving this week, causing public concern about the COVID-19 status of the men. The immigration minister confirmed that every one of the 134 persons was in possession of their Ministry of Health travel visa, and each presented authorities with a negative COVID-19 test result. Well, with the reopening of the country's borders this week, the director of the Pan American Health Organization is warning countries that have decided to relax measures to be ready for a potential surge. Our Giorgio Bain reports.
Warning countries not to fold under political pressure to relax emergency measures too soon, PAHO Director Dr. Carissa Etienne, who addressed a briefing on COVID-19 numbers in the Americas, warned countries that reports have shown that countries that relax measures too quickly have seen a surge in new cases.
Countries, states, and cities that do not embrace preventive measures or relax restrictions too soon can be flooded with new cases. This forces us to face a hard truth. We must not abandon what works because of fatigue or political pressure. This virus does not work that way. We need to double down on measures that save lives early on and to deploy them with more precision than ever before.
According to Etienne, governments must be prepared to adjust course quickly, adding that if you have the will to relax preventative measures, you must have the will to pull back if the situation calls for it.
Reopening is not merely suspending travel restrictions and stay-at-home orders. It requires implementing a set of public health measures to track new cases and build sufficient capacity to detect and control new outbreaks. These steps include the ample access to timely testing for every suspected case and their contacts.
Etienne warned that complacency is the enemy in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic and urged Caribbean countries to remain steadfast despite a slowdown in transmissions.
Several Caribbean countries and territories were able to curb transmission completely and have reported no new cases for several weeks. But they need to remain vigilant for months to come. We must take into account this mosaic of situations and work within diverse settings to keep transmission under control. In the absence of a vaccine or effective treatments, the tools we have at our disposal are limited, and we have no option but to make the best use of them.
Reporting for our News Weekend Edition, I'm Giorgio Bain.
Social Services Minister Frankie Campbell confirming that there has been an increased number of reported domestic dispute reports during the COVID-19 pandemic. Campbell, who was speaking with reporters outside of cabinet this week, said his ministry is working with law enforcement on these matters.
I've heard of increased numbers. Specifically, I can't give those numbers to you because you would appreciate that those matters would be reported predominantly to the police, and then our people would get involved. But my information is that there have been increased matters of domestic violence, child abuse, that kind of thing.
Campbell commented last week that his ministry is concerned about the number of persons being hauled before the courts on child abuse charges. Several men were charged with a host of sexually related charges this week. Campbell said his ministry is working with several NGOs to curb the growing numbers.
Well, we have the good fortune of working with a number of NGOs along with the Department of Gender and Family, and so our people kick into action automatically, and they do what they do. We are responsive whenever we hear of a matter, and we do cross-collaborate with the law enforcement officers, so we are part of those inquiries once we are aware of them.
Class of 2020 graduates anticipating scholarship funds to assist with funding their tertiary education will be disappointed, as they won't receive any assistance this year from the Bahamian government and Scholarship Educational Loan Division. That according to Education Minister Jeff Lloyd.
Decision has been taken that there will be no external scholarship granted or awarded this year, only just this year. That decision has been taken because, as you know, all ministries and departments have had, by mandate of the Ministry of Finance, a 20% reduction in their budget, and obviously $16 million scholarship budget has necessarily been affected.
According to Lloyd, arriving at the decision has been difficult. The National Merit Scholarship is the second highest level of merit scholarship awarded by the government. Lloyd encourages graduates who can't afford university abroad without the financial assistance to attend the University of the Bahamas for this year.
Absolutely, in the health area, disciplines, not just being a doctor, but radiologists, technicians, and so on. Definitely in technology, definitely in agriculture, definitely in business, particularly accounting and finance. Desperate need. Areas such as construction technology, engineering, desperate need.
Meantime, schools which were significantly damaged by Hurricane Dorian and Abaco are expected to be up and running by the new school year. That's according to the Education Minister. He did note the exception of the Patrick Bethel High School, which still remains significantly damaged.
The majority of them, Patrick Bethel is probably not going to be ready. There's no chance for South Patrick Bethel to be ready. Extensive damage, number one. Number two, the contractor has only been engaged now approximately a month. And the work that's needed to be done, no way it's going to be ready. All the other schools, yes, we are very hopeful, and we expect that it will be. Central Abaco Primary is going to be ready. They are well about 90% on the way, so we only have 10% to cover in the next 2 months.
Lloyd says the COVID-19 pandemic, which brought the construction field to a standstill, undoubtedly hindered the rebuilding process of the schools, which were on target to be completed by the new school year.
Absolutely. If you remember, there were phased openings after the lockdowns, and I think it wasn't until phase 2 that that construction work can go back again. Now, Abaco and Grand Bahama was a little bit different. I think that there was a little bit more laxity by the competent authority. But still, it was a matter of getting in there and doing the work safely because a lot of debris still needed to be moved. And we talked about mobilization.
Human rights groups Right Bahamas is endorsing a Supreme Court justice's call recommending Parliament to consider scrapping the controversial offense of criminal libel. In a ruling handed down this week, Justice Lauren Klein suggested the offense is deeply mired in antiquity and social control and does not sit well with the modern constitution and is incompatible with modern forms of communications. In a statement, Rights Bahamas says Klein points out that criminal libel is considered outmoded in many countries and that there is an active international campaign for governments to repeal it or for the courts to strike it out. Klein called on Parliament to give serious consideration as to whether such an offense remains viable or whether there should be a move to the more modern catalog of alternatives to criminal libel or other legislation specifically applicable to internet-based platforms of communication. Rights Bahamas Legal Director Fred Smith QC praised the judge's remarks as a most timely and welcome defense of democracy and fundamental freedoms. He is urging Parliament to take Justice Klein up on his recommendation and follow the global trend in replacing what he calls outmoded and oppressive law with more modern, humane, and democratic alternatives. Well, still ahead tonight, a financial expert calls for a greater disclosure on budget estimates. Plus, find out how the Office of the Spouse is assisting during the pandemic. Those stories and more coming up. Next tonight, Fidelity Group Chief Gowan Bowe is calling on a greater disclosure of information by government relating to estimates and assumptions behind putting together budget communications.
Are you asking the question? It means that there's uncertainty as to is this a valid estimate, right? If we were to say that the way the VAT collections was determined was saying that when we looked at last year, what was consumption? So when we know, because we have the information based on business license, submissions, etc., what sales were in the previous year. If we know that the economy has been shut down for 2-3 months, so some of these would be reduced by that amount, then you can start doing mathematics.
During his 2020-2021 budget communication, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest said government's looking to collect $666.3 million in value-added tax. That's down from the $973.3 million collected in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. The DPM reiterated that government has been generous in its estimations.
That is a decrease from the previous year, and we do take into account that overall we anticipate that we're going to have about a $900 million slip year over year in terms of revenue collections. But we are focusing on compliance. We are focusing on ensuring that we collect all of the taxes that are due to the government. And in so doing, we do not have to increase taxes, and we do not place any burden on any one industry or sector. So we have been conservative in our estimations, and we believe that we will be able to generate those returns.
Well, the wife of the Prime Minister says as families have been hit hard by the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, her office has had to provide assistance to many in need. Our Jillian Gray has that.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues to affect families across the Bahamas, wife of the Prime Minister Patricia Minnis said she's reached out to young girls and women to donate food and assist as best she can. She added that the pandemic has dealt a heavy blow to families.
I have touched many lives around the Bahamas, and there are families where the husband, the wife, children who are at home, grown children, are not working. So you would have families where there's no work going on, and so we touch them as best that we can, especially where they're young girls now at home from summer, from school, those who haven't graduated. And so they're sitting around, and so we're trying to touch them.
The Office of the Spouse, through the Women and Girls Mentoring Coalition, mentors young ladies from 26 organizations. At the end of the month, they'll be hosting a seminar to teach women craft skills they can use to open up a business.
We will put on a food processing class with the Ministry of Agriculture so that these young students can see alternative things that they can do at home. They can process pepper sauce, guava jams, pineapple and mango, seasonal things. They can do those processing of them, and their families would be able to sell them.
Minnis said the pandemic has affected funding, but she still manages to raise extra funds through her network of relatives, friends, and civic organizations. The coalition will be traveling to Abaco soon to provide support to women and children on that island.
So now we'll go down there with packages for them to have just snacks along with toys and books. Very important that we put these children while they're home for the summer to read. So we are having a reading program as well where we are asking them to come and pick up books, adults and children books. That again will happen the end of July.
Reporting for Our News Weekend, I'm Jillian Gray.
When our news, the weekend edition, comes back from the break, we introduce you to a business that brings a restaurant to you. So stay with us.
Hey, but Dubs. Hey. Speaking of ideas, though. Ah! Yes, solid idea, but.
Here we go again.
Stop joking, boy.
Murder? That on your passport, so you better name him murder?
Hey, what did you start? Just gotta be a blessing, boy, because ain't nobody that stupid to come here to lose their money. Lose your money, boy.
Gina T? On your right nipple, Gina? What it is?
Stop you with the same store.
Well, Greasy Brothers, we gotta sing to you. Happy birthday from the Greasy crew. We can buy one down snack and all of us can share it.
I like him. He's funny.
You think that funny? Bum chicky, bum chicky, bum chicky, bum chicky, bum chicky. It's a birthday, bum chicky.
Welcome back to Our News, the weekend edition. The new normal is seeing many decide to stay home even as the economy reopens. This business gives you the chance, though, to have a dining experience without leaving your home. Our Jared Hayes tells us more.
I want to enjoy that luxury, a nice, elegant meal, but I don't want to come out of my house.
Well, Mac Altador says he has a solution for you. After speaking to a second homeowner who plans to return but doesn't want to go out and socialize, Altador realized there was an opportunity.
We introduce provision chefs. So if someone go on to www.provisionchefs.com, you have the opportunity to choose some of the best chefs on the island. Like a chef, like Jamal Petty is on there, Carvision Pratt is on there, and a few others that are well known. Ryan McIntosh is on there. And these are all chefs that have either represented the Bahamas as well, like myself in culinary. I've worked at some of the nicest resorts.
With concerns over COVID-19 still at the top of many minds, Altador says his business, Provision Chefs, solves many problems without causing more issues.
The same regulations that the restaurants are taking with sanitization and the social distancing, and we're asking every single homeowner that we go to make sure prior to the chef's arrival that your kitchen is properly sanitized and clean. And again, when the chef leaves, one of the services that he leave that place just as he met it, properly sanitized and clean as if he wasn't there.
Altador also has a solution for yachters too and their staff. If they don't want to come on land, he'll provide them with a top-class shopper.
I was speaking with a friend who's a chef on board a 250-foot yacht, and he says, Mark, because we have guests on board, it's going to be difficult now for us to get off the ship and go shopping. So I said, why don't I add that into the platform as well? So now the chefs, and again, chefs have a different eye. The chef on board now can now rely on a chef that's on the ground here in Nassau to go out to the grocery store and pick the right apple, pick the right produce, pick the right beef.
Reporting for Our News Weekend, I'm Jared Hayes.
All right, thanks a lot, Jared. Our final story is on the other side of this break, so stay with us.
Rev is making it easier for you to complete all your lockdown errands in one trip. You can now pay your Rev bill at all participating Solomon's locations, including the Yamacraw, Old Trail, and Lucaya Freeport locations, effective Thursday, April 23rd, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and thereafter, Monday to Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So shop for those much-needed groceries and pay your bill at the same time, all the convenience in one location. Cash payments accepted. Rev, you and us together.
Finally tonight, celebrations to commemorate the country's 47th independence officially kicked off in Grand Bahama yesterday with the flag-raising ceremony. Only a few people were allowed to participate in the brief ceremony held on the grounds of the Office of the Prime Minister. Deputy Prime Minister Peter Turnquest was on hand for the event, reminding Bahamians of their resilient spirit. Meantime, State Minister for Grand Bahama Kwesi Thompson took the opportunity to thank all of the essential workers who endured the tough working conditions during the COVID-19 pandemic and also during the passage and aftermath of Hurricane Dorian. The ceremony ended with the hoisting of the Bahamian flag by members of the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces.